InvestorIdeas.com podcast.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of InvestorIdeas.com podcast. In today's podcast, we're going to be looking at a few public company announcements from American Cannabis Company Incorporated, trading on the OTCQB as AMMJ, the Supreme Cannabis Company Incorporated, trading on the TSX as FIRE, and the OTCQX as SPRWF, Relieve Therapeutics Incorporated, trading on the CSE as RVV, and the OTC as RVVTF, as well as the Green Organic Dutchman Holdings Limited, trading on the TSX as TGOD and the OTC as TGODF. So, first starting with American Cannabis Company Incorporated, a full-service business-to-business cannabis and hemp consultation solutions provider, who announced its approval for an operator's license by Colorado's Marijuana Enforcement Division. Now, on November 10th, Colorado's Marijuana Enforcement Division, or MED, approved the company's application for an operator's license, which will allow it to now manage and operate both recreational and medical cannabis operations throughout Colorado. Now, this recent approval is key in the company's plan to effectively roll out its management services to operators who seek to improve their overall business efficiencies. And in addition to this approval for an operator's license, the company recently received MED approval for a suitability license, establishing the Denver-based company as one of the few publicly traded companies authorized to acquire and operate various cannabis licenses throughout Colorado. Now, Terry Buffalo, the Chief Executive Officer of American Cannabis Company, commented, "We are happy to now have the ability to deploy our operational management platform across the Colorado market as we seek to continually expand our service offerings. We provide our suite of management services to those who may need guidance in various areas of business related to cultivation, retail, or extraction operations. And in having secured both suitability and operators licenses within Colorado, we now have a multi-pronged approach in advancing our brand forward in this market. And we effectively work to implement our growth strategies. We will actively deploy our management platform while continuing to pivot our business model and advance brand expansion efforts by looking at multiple operational acquisition opportunities." So American Cannabis Company definitely getting some pretty cool licenses within Colorado. We haven't seen this really established within other states so far, but I do expect that you're going to see similar rollouts like this within other states. So this operators and suitability license really allows them to jump in and out of multiple businesses within the state, so they can pretty much enter into any different side of the operation, whether it's retail, whether it's actual production or extraction, and everywhere in between. And in general, I do think that this is something that's been lacking from most cannabis established markets right now, is the ability for larger companies to then bring in their operational expertise to assist with growth and investing in the smaller companies, and then to move on, as opposed to having to just fully acquire them, which is what we've seen in the past. Obviously, within Canada, Canopy Growth, Aurora, Afria, they've done a lot of acquisitions, but again, haven't really just lent out their management expertise, or vice versa, had some management expertise get lent out to them when it comes to building out some of their facilities. So I do think that hopefully you'll see this get established within other states, as well as into Canada and other legal cannabis markets as well. And for right now, I'd definitely be paying attention to American Cannabis Company over the next year or two within Colorado to see how well they can actually build out their branding within that sort of state. And again, also if this gets adapted by other states. Looking next at the Supreme Cannabis Company Incorporated, who announced that the company has entered into a supply agreement with medical cannabis by Shoppers. So under the terms of the supply agreement with medical cannabis by Shoppers, the company will now offer their Truvera branded medical cannabis products through online sales as well as patients across Canada. This is an important development that establishes Truvera as a valuable medical cannabis brand and provides further diversification of our revenue, said Bina Goldenberg, the president and CEO of Supreme Cannabis. We are particularly pleased to introduce Truvera to Canadian patients who will be able to order dried flower, pre-rolls, and full-spectrum CBD oil. Including in our offering will be our Jean Guy strain, which is a tribute to the legendary variety offered by the Montreal Compassion Club. And also through Shoppers Portal, patients can be assured of expert customer service from a trusted brand. So another brand jumping onto the medical cannabis program by Shoppers, very late in the game. And the only reason I sort of bring up this announcement today is showing that there are still companies that are still having difficulties when it comes to onboarding and fully building out their medical programs within Canada. Again, you've seen a lot of companies focus heavily on recreational for the first 2 years, still continuing to this day. But you are starting to see most of them realize now that the medical cannabis by Shoppers program is well enough built out that they should be having their brands within that marketplace right now. It's a little late for Supreme Cannabis Company to be getting in there. They do have a pretty big portfolio of brands and products that are already available through Medical Cannabis by Shoppers, but I would expect that over the next year or so, you're going to see basically every Canadian company that has products within the recreational market at some point start building out products for the medical market through Shoppers. Um, Hopefully most of them are already preparing for that. And again, I would also hope to see differences in dosage as well as differences in sort of product formats, which we are seeing a little bit with the Truvera brand. But again, just a little bit late, and hopefully you do see this sort of trend pick up a little bit for some of the companies who have also been lagging behind. Next, looking at Revive Therapeutics Limited, who provided an update on its oral thin film delivery system, with psilocybin being developed under a research partnership agreement with Reed Research Group out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Now, following several months of prototyping a wide range of dosage forms, the company has completed an oral thin film strip product with psilocybin with dosage forms ranging between 1 milligram and 20 milligram, and demonstrating its versatility through physiochemical characterization, i.e., tensile strength of films, of biocomparable tannin, chistosin, composite materials, dissolution and disintegration testing, and rate of psilocybin release from composites. We are very pleased to have achieved this development milestone of our orally dissolvable thin film strip for psilocybin, which can be used in FDA human clinical studies and as a unique product for medical use in states where psilocybin therapy use is permitted, such as Oregon following the passage of Measure 109, said Michael Frank, the CEO of Revive. There's a significant market opportunity for our unique oral thin film strip technology for not only delivering psilocybin, but also delivering numerous psychedelic-based medicines to treat various diseases and disorders that would benefit from such a delivery method. Also, we are in position to begin partnering with life sciences companies seeking to add unique offerings to their psychedelic-based product pipeline, and with companies operating in the U.S. where psilocybin therapy use is legal. Now, under its sponsored research partnership with Reed Research Group out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, the company is developing its tannin-chitosan composite of orally dissolvable thin film strips, which offers a unique delivery platform for therapeutic doses 1 to 20 milligrams of psilocybin, and the company has finalized the prototypes and is preparing to scale for manufacturing for future clinical studies involving psilocybin and other psychedelic-derived medicines. So, I've talked a lot about Revive Therapeutics and oral thin film strips in the past, not just from Revive, but from a multitude of companies that have really focused on the thin film strip segment for cannabis. Obvious transition now into the psychedelic industry. I do think that there will probably be more benefits to the oral thin film strips within the psychedelic community than there is in the cannabis community. And I think the main issue that's been sort of addressed multiple times, and even though there are many people who are on board with the thin film strips, the general sort of issues that I think that these companies have been running into is dosing for one, and as well overall product taste and sort of formulation. A lot of people are getting a little bit more educated when it comes to cannabis consumption, or a little bit more aware of the terpenes and the value of full spectrum products. And I think that that'll be pretty much impossible to ever complete through oral thin film strips. I know some companies have boasted that, but again, these aren't really giving you the same effects and overall endocannabinoid uptakes as you would get from different distillates or extract products, or even from the dry bud itself. But I do see a lot more benefits within the psychedelic and psilocybin research community, especially when it comes to consistent dosing and low format dosing. Again, when we're looking at the medical community for oral thin film strips for cannabis, the dosage needs to be much higher, and they haven't really addressed that too aggressively so far. Whereas for psilocybin and most of these psychedelics, most of the therapies that are coming out these days are focused around microdosing, or at least on low format dosing. So I do think that that'll go hand in hand. I also think that the main difference there is that most of these psychoactive or psychedelic compounds do not taste good. They're not something that people want to enjoy the taste of or pick up those factors. So obviously having a tasteless dissolved substance going to be a little bit more appreciated by the consumers and patients that are using those products. So hopefully you might see that transition. I do expect that there will be a few other companies that also create those thin oral film strips to also be looking at this for the future of psychedelic research. But very interesting to see, and it'll be interesting to see again where that gets adopted, hopefully in Oregon over the next year. Lastly, today, looking at the Green Organic Dutchman Holding Limited, who announced its financial results for the third quarter of 2020 ended September 30th, as well as leadership changes. And you can look for more information in the link in the article or check out their website or cdar.com. So the company also announced that Brian Atide has left his position as Chief Executive Officer and Board Director effective immediately. And TGOD Chief Financial Officer Sean Bavingdon has been appointed the interim CEO. In addition, Michelle Gagny, the Vice President of Operations, has been appointed the Chief Operating Officer, overseeing the company's cultivation and processing operations, supply chain, and product development. And in his new role as COO, he will work closely with the CEO on the company's overall strategy and execution. On behalf of the Board of Directors, we thank Brian Atide for his contribution to TGOD, and I am pleased that Sean has agreed to lead the company at this critical juncture, commented Jeff Scott, the chairman of the board. He recognizes the challenges we must confront, and I look forward to working with him and the rest of the TGOD team to pave a new way forward for the company, added Mr. Scott. Now, during the third quarter, despite certain production challenges that have now been addressed, we continued to deliver growth following the launch of our mainstream brand Highly Dutch in Quebec, as well as teas and Ripple dissolvable powders. Now, our focus will continue to be on improving the execution of our existing production while developing innovative and distinctive products to introduce into more stores across the country, commented Sean Bavingdon, the interim CEO of TGOD. And we saw encouraging numbers in October as we sold more flower, additional Ripple and tea variants, and launched hash in Quebec. We're looking to build on this growth while focusing on financial discipline throughout the company, added Mr. Bovington. Now, some of the financial highlights included a total revenue of $5.71 million, an increase of 120% over the third quarter of 2019. Canadian cannabis revenue of $3.84 million, an increase of 41% quarter over quarter. And the company records non-cash impaired charge of $67.84 million. Again, you can read the rest of the financial details in the link in the article, or again at their website or cdar.com. But in general, Green Organic Dutchman finally maybe moving in a better direction. They've been a company that's had a lot of struggles when it comes to their release of financial results in the past. A lot of issues, obviously, which they briefly touched on when it comes to their supply and production, and also just brand recognition. They have started to been picking up more momentum within Quebec as well as within other provinces. Their Ripple and tea variants have been doing quite well within the beverage sector. Again, the beverage sector is still quite limited right now, so that's not really saying much for any of the companies within that space, but at least it has been well received by consumers, and the format, which is sort of that dissolvable package format, which I did think would be a hindrance for them as a brand, has been actually well received. So hopefully they'll continue along that path, and hopefully their next brands will be a little bit more thought through. This is a similar theme we're seeing for most of these large-scale producers right now. And TGOD, maybe not the largest of scale producers, but still within the larger end of that space. And a lot of them have been focusing on shoring up their finances, creating better brands, focusing on different market segments as opposed to the low-cost market segment, which hasn't done any of them any benefit. Trying to create premium brands, trying to create next-generation products. So obviously creating some hash products has been done well. And similarly to what we've seen from some of the other LPs over the last little while, TGOD did not take the huge dump that it normally has after releasing some of the financial results. Again, not saying them specifically, but many of the companies within the cannabis space have had a strong lead up to their results and then a strong sell-off on the day of. TGOD is actually remaining somewhat on an uptrend, and hopefully, again, that trend starts to pay off into all the other cannabis companies, which we've seen over the last couple of weeks with the sort of renewed invigoration from investors following a lot of the election results. That's all for today's podcast. Enjoy the rest of your day. That's all for today's podcast. Podcast is now a certified word trademark on the blockchain through Cognate Incorporated CM certification. InvestorIdeas.com podcasts are also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and TuneIn. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor of this podcast, please contact InvestorIdeas.com. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimers and disclosures on the InvestorIdeas.com website, and this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investments involve risk and possible loss of investment. Investor Ideas does not condone the use of cannabis except where permissible by law. Our site does not possess, distribute, or sell cannabis products.